Today is December 4th, 2024. This is episode 73 of the In a Nutshell podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and as usual, I'm joined by Joe Meade. Tonight, Joe and I will do a little recap of the first 2 days of Big Ten basketball conference play, another bye game in here that we need to talk about because it was important, and then we'll preview the upcoming games here as conference play and a couple of big non-conference games into the weekend. But, Joe, we are going to start with a bye game that happened yesterday that involved my Indiana Hoosiers. They come off of Atlantis at 1-2, and they have a low 100s KenPom team roll into town, very dangerous, that shoots threes at a high clip, favored by just 13. The Hoosiers take care of business, winning by 26. South Carolina also picks up a big win, and Providence picks up a big win. So while the alarm bells must have been going off nonstop for Indiana and their fans, yesterday was a pretty good day all around.
Yeah, Sean, I think this was a big dismantling that Indiana needed to do. They got ahead early and they stayed ahead early. I know this is something you've been on them in the past for, hanging way too close in a majority of these bye games. Let's face it, the Mike Woodson era has been what it's been so far in the non-conference. But I did think getting Luke Goody going was a really good sign. I really hope for his sake and for Indiana's sake he can continue to do that, because if you have a continued presence from him off the bench, it could be a really dangerous offense to deal with. Sean, outside of Luke Goody, who else impressed you in this game?
The defensive intensity was impressive early. It did really lack, especially in the second half, and that's a separate conversation. But, Renew 18-10-5. He's always been really good against lesser competition, even the lesser competition in the Big Ten to an extent. Miles Rice really got going in the second half. He had a tough first half. But Goody really was the story, Joe. Everybody else had done what they did this game already, but he obviously makes 5 threes. He's on the floor for 17 minutes. He does commit 4 personal fouls, and that is the defense is what's going to keep his minutes down. But to cover a game, to have a cover margin of plus 13 is good. I mean that is a good number. That they moved up almost 25 spots yesterday with the other results that I mentioned. They're up to 44th in KenPom. Now, that's a place where you can still get a pretty good seed in the NCAA tournament. But, Joe, anything else on this game before I do want to talk about something else for Indiana?
No, Sean, I think, this is a game Indiana fans are going to be happy with, but if something else goes wrong pretty soon, they're going to soon forget it.
And Joe, I don't know why Indiana's playing bye games this week and Big Ten games next week. None of the other teams are doing that.
Great job, Tony Petitti.
I don't know why. They still do get their 2 games in December here, but everyone else is playing them this week. But, Joe, a lot of people do like to criticize the offense of Indiana, and I did some research, and the only year that the offense has been worse than the defense was Mike Woodson's first year in charge, that team that went to the First Four in Dayton and beat Wyoming. So this is now the 3rd straight year where the offense is grading more efficiently than the defense. Is that more of a sign that maybe the offense is actually, while it might look ugly at times and static, that it's better than people think? Or is the defense starting to become an issue?
I'm a bigger fan of the offense than years past because I do think there are a lot more options on this team. I think,
and they are moving it a little better.
On each, yeah,
they are moving it a little better this year, and they're also running plays for threes. Mbako, Goody, that it is a little better this year. Now there's still a couple issues with it, but I do think the defense is going to be an issue in a couple games. They don't put together more than a good half of defense. You'll see 4 or 5 good plays in a row and forcing turnovers and blocking shots, but they can't put together, let alone a full month of good defense. They can't put together a good game of defense. Sam Houston has a couple good shot makers, and they did win the Conference USA last year, which is why a 26-point win here is actually more impressive than people will give them credit for. But when you give players in this caliber of the game open shots, they're going to make them. And as of right now, Indiana is 43rd in offense, probably around where was expected of them, and 60th in defense. That is something that will have to improve for Indiana to reach the levels that a lot of people think that they could reach. All right, Joe, we'll go to Big Ten play now. 3 games yesterday. One obviously involved your team. One, we're not going there yet, though. Iowa, Josh Dix hits a game-winning fall-away 3 to give the Hawkeyes a 1-point win against Northwestern at home. Joe, this is one where Iowa led by double digits at the break, soon relinquished that lead, and looked like Northwestern was going to steal one on the road here. But no, Iowa gets away with one. Is this well, it is a missed opportunity for Northwestern, but where do you see these two teams going forward?
I really don't know, Sean. This is probably the most Iowa Northwestern game you could have in terms of, and I'm not taking anything away, particularly from a Chris Collins or a Fran McCaffrey. They've had a lot of success in this conference over the last decade, particularly Chris Collins. She's probably been the guy who's done more with less. If there was a Big Ten basketball definition of doing more with less, Chris Collins would have to be the photo of it, in my opinion. Outside of that, though, they've won a lot of games on some buzzer beaters, on some absolutely miraculous performances, and they put themselves in those positions. And the same could be said with Iowa, right? This game was not shocking at all the way it ended. I thought it was a really entertaining game. I thought Brooks Barnheiser, Ty Berry, and Nick Martinelli played phenomenal for Northwestern. And then, surprisingly for Iowa, they didn't have a whole lot of variance. I thought Josh Dix, Peyton Sanford, Owen Freeman. So in reality, it was the big three versus the big three. I know Brock Harding did a lot, certainly assisted on a lot of plays, but at the end of the day, when I watch Iowa, I'm worrying about Dix, Sanford, and Owen Freeman. And as proven by the ending, Josh Dix gets the game winner. And I do want to just say this about Ty Berry because he is one of the better shooters in this conference.
Yeah,
I hate how he
finally
was
started to make some shots.
I hate how he was 5 of 9, 3 of 4 on free throws, but the fourth free throw is going to be the one everyone remembers. Because if he sinks that, I do think Chris Collins would have found, because he's been in this conference long enough to know, leaving Iowa time when it comes down to 3-point shooting is probably one of the worst things you could do in this conference. And unfortunately, he found out the hard way, inbounding with point 8 seconds to go. And honest to God, Sean, I want your take. I knew that was going in
Yeah,
because it's happened so much to my team, and it's definitely happened to other teams in this conference at Iowa.
I don't think, Joe, like, I agree with you. None of what happened here in this game was surprising at all. We have a team in Iowa who is fairly efficient offensively and can be picked apart defensively. Now, they're a little better at defense than they've been. They rank 77th right now, and that is an upgrade from where even the good Iowa teams, that is an upgrade. And Northwestern is kind of the opposite. They're a pretty good defensive team at 36 and offensively at 86. Obviously, they had some cold spells here, but they also did make a lot of shots. They got back in this game. They took the lead, and like I said, none of this was surprising. It's really unfortunate for Northwestern. They almost pulled off a road victory. But, Joe, the 2 takeaways that I have here, and we'll see if you agree with it, is number 1, both these teams are going to struggle with a lack of depth. Pretty much all of the good players played well here. I mean, Jalen Leach, 9 points, 3 of 9. But Martinelli had 19, Barry 20, Barnheiser 21, Freeman 16, Sanford 20, Dix 22. I mean, these are all the good players. And after that, it was not much from the supporting cast. So lack of depth, I think, will be a problem for both these squads. And number 2 is I think both these teams are not going to make the tournament. Tournament teams would have seized this game and won it convincingly rather than leaving the team a chance to win it like Northwestern did. And Iowa was up double digits. They could have put this thing away if they were good enough, in my opinion. But what do you think about those two?
I'm still a believer in Northwestern making the tournament. I am a firm believer that Iowa is much similar, much like Maryland, who we'll talk about later. I think they're a home giant and it's like a road turtle, for lack of a better term. They cannot win games on the road where they have a talent disadvantage or even like a talent like comparison that's equal. So, this game had me more impressed with Northwestern, believe it or not, Sean, because came back, which doing against an offense like Iowa on the road is really hard to do. Iowa, I just chalk it up to luck. I'm sorry, Sean. I
Yep.
really wish I could say more of Iowa, but they are what they are. They have three really good players. They have a bench. Maybe they could get something from Mini Sanford, but outside of that, Sean, I think if you shut down one of those big three, they're an extremely beatable team.
And I think, Joe, if these teams, which I think are probably in the bottom part of the middle of the pack, if they play like that against any team that's better than them, they're losing,
Absolutely.
whether it's at home or on the road. And I think both these teams will win home games that they probably don't deserve. Example here for Iowa, Northwestern will win games at home. They're well coached. It's just going to happen. But watching this and both teams really failing to grasp this victory, I think will, you know, more times than not, this team is going to lose a game like this. Now, obviously, both teams can't lose a game, so Iowa gets it. But my takeaways, I think the Big Ten might be better than people think, but it's not because of these two teams. All right, Joe, the biggest game of the night in the conference yesterday was your Michigan Wolverines going to the Big Bad Kohl Center up north in Madison, and it is Michigan who pulls off the road victory 67-64. Vlad Golden has his career high. He's played over 100 college basketball games. His career high, 24 points, 5 rebounds. Danny Wolf also with 20 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. Joe, Michigan gets the job done. And take me through this one before I think we can talk a little bit about both teams' future.
Sean, this was the most unexpected win in recent Michigan basketball history, not because of the result. I think that spread was anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5, depending on what book you looked on. You even predicted Michigan to win. I actually predicted a 67-61 final in the favor of the Badgers. So 67-64 wasn't so far off on the
You
score.
you got the low scoring part right. I got the Michigan. I thought it was going to be a high scoring game, but nope.
No, and it wasn't high scoring because neither team could make a shot from deep. Michigan was 6 of 25 from three. Wisconsin was even worse, 6 of 27. Definitely not a night to remember from that department. This was all about Michigan's big, Sean. Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden, this was a duo I really doubted at the beginning of the year. Not necessarily on an individual level, just how it could work on the floor. Two guys at once. Could they space it out? Could they defend the right way? This game was solid proof. They could do that and then some. The high low they were doing from Wolf to Golden, the high low high, the low high low passing they did, and high low high between Roddy Gale, Danny Wolf, Vlad Golden, particularly on the final sequences at the end of the game, were fantastic. This was a game I think a lot of teams would lose early on. For example, Michigan could not buy a three in the first half. Their best three-point shooter, Sam Walters, really needs to see a sports psychologist. I don't know what the heck's wrong with this shot. 0 of 3. The bench had a total of 6 points, and they got a majority of that in the first half via Will Shetter and 1 point from Reuben Jones. So completely zero contribution from Michigan's bench, and actually had two turnovers from the freshman LJ Case, and definitely a night to forget for him. But all of it didn't matter, Sean, because Wolf and Golden carried this team. Dusty figured out at halftime, all right, we survived the first half playing our worst half of basketball all year. How are we going to fix this? He fixed it by not letting them shoot too many dumb threes and by putting guys on the floor he trusted. And the moment a guy on the bench made a mistake, he was quick to alleviate the concern. I mean, alleviate the mistakes. And that's ultimately why I think Dusty's going to do well in this conference. He made a lot of adjustments, and he kind of allowed the game to play out. Michigan fell behind 29-20 really in the middle of the second half, and they ended the half on a 6-3 run, which might seem minor, but at the Kohl Center, 9 point deficits could turn into 17 point deficits. And against Wisconsin, that's like a 30 point deficit while on the road. So they managed the game well. They made some big shots. One thing that's really concerning is the rebounding, something I highlighted as a key. That's something that really allowed Wisconsin to hang around at the end and almost allowed them to pull off a miracle because they had so many second chance points. It was really frustrating to say the least. I mean, my hand, I know you see it's a little bruised in this finger, may or may not have been from slamming my hand, but no shot. I think Michigan is a very realistic threat to win the conference, maybe more of a dark horse than a than a coveted favorite, but I do think the future's looking up. And for Wisconsin, I think they do a lot of things right. I do think they're going to have to get Max Klesmit going, though. 1 of 9 from three. The rest of the lineup outside of John Tachi, 0 of 6, not going to get it done at all.
And I'll bring it back a little bit, Joe. Here's the reason why I thought Michigan might win this game, mostly from a psychology point of view. Wisconsin has been hearing for a week about how great they are and how awesome their offense is and how they're, the best team in the league. And Michigan has an elite defense at this point. They do rank in the top 5 in KenPom in defensive efficiency. I thought Michigan would make it a little tough for John Tanji to score. And he does get 18, Joe, but he really had to work for that. 5 of 12 from the field, only got 6 free throws. So I thought that could be a way that Michigan could slow him down. And Klesmit, he's going to keep taking shots, and I don't think anything really looks wrong yet. Maybe a couple double clutches that he should have just let fly, but I think he will make more shots. And in terms of the X's and O's on offense for Michigan, Joe, I just thought Dusty was a step or two ahead of Greg Gard all day. Something worked, Gard adjusted, he switched it. That worked. Gard adjusted, he switched it. It was really fun to watch if you're into the X's and O's. And the way that I don't think it'll really work against every team, especially teams that can switch that. But Wisconsin sort of hard hedges all the screens, which means a tag is involved with an off-ball player. And Joe, they just kept doing that with the two bigs and a guard, who I think Klesmit was guarding, until they got a matchup that they liked down low, and then it was an easy layup for Wolf or Golden. It was really, I think, a masterclass from Dusty May. And the fact that the guards had such a poor game for Michigan.
Pathetic game, not poor, pathetic.
They were 5 of 20 from the field. And the fact that you won a road game against a team that we still think is pretty good and probably will make the tournament. I don't know if they're top 25, Wisconsin, but I do think they'll make the tournament. The fact that you're able to win a road game at having your guards shoot 5 of 20 is something. And I don't think both teams played particularly their best, but I think that's more of a compliment to Michigan. Joe, when Michigan doesn't play well, they're still playing around where the spread says the game should be. I mean, they really threw away that Wake Forest game. They were supposed to, that was a 2-point spread. They lose by 2. And when they're playing well, they're absolutely obliterating the analytics. So I think Michigan is probably a top 25 team at this point until somebody can stop that too big look. And there are a couple teams in the Big Ten who do sort of a switching thing defensively and do have the bodies to do that. And it'll be interesting to see what happens for Michigan then. But Joe, I mean, you are a couple of untimely turnovers away from being 8-0 if we're being honest.
1,000%, Sean, and I'm very glad they lost that Wake Forest game at hindsight. Otherwise, they might have fallen into the psychology trap that Wisconsin did.
Yeah, these are college kids. They read stuff. They listen to people talk about how good they are. And Michigan will host Iowa on Saturday up next, both teams that won their first game in close games that could have gone either way. All right, last night, Joe, the final one, UCLA took care of business on Washington. This was an incredibly late game that reminded us that it might not be so fun sometimes that these teams are in the league with these late tips. UCLA wins by double digits. The spread was 11.5. They win by 11. UCLA simply takes care of business over an inferior opponent.
Yeah, Sean, I think the biggest difference was the big play from UCLA, particularly Tyler Bilodeau, the Oregon State transfer. Very efficient night, 6 of 8 from the field, 16 points. And you compare that to Great Ossenborg, who's one of the better players in this conference. I think he's a top 10 player in this conference. 4 of 11 from the field, 14 points, 6 of 11 on free throws. Small things like that in this game made a big difference because it was tight throughout. I do want to highlight the efforts of Sebastian Mack, who came off the bench, 16 points, the sophomore from Chicago. I think he really spotted guys like Sky Clark, Kobe Johnson, who had a really rough night, and I do think the fact this was at UCLA helped a lot with that. And let's face it, Sean, I think Danny Sprinkle's a heck of a coach. They're going to face a depth issue, something we talked about for Northwestern and Iowa as well, just in year one of Davy Sprinkle. I do think they're going to get recruiting going, and I think they're going to really be a team in this conference that's not going to be fun to play. But right now, Sean, it's hard to think Washington's not going to continue to struggle, even though they gave a good effort last night. I do think they were pretty lucky to even keep it this close. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
offensively, Joe, it is tough for them. I mean, Washington ranks all right defensively; they're in the top 50, but they're outside of the top 140 in offense. There will be a game where they hit shots and win at home against a team that is better than them, but it just seems like they have such a narrow margin for error. And like you said, this wasn't a great UCLA performance, and still they were able to cruise to a rather easy victory. But I think a bottom of the barrel finish for Washington is coming, and if this can be sort of the regular performance for UCLA, I think they're going to win a number of games here.
yeah, absolutely, Sean, and that's why I picked them to win this conference. I do think they have enough talent, and I one thing I've learned in my life, unfortunately, in 2021, do not doubt the coaching prowess of Mick Cronin.
And just from a visual standpoint, Joe, physicality and sort of style of play, I do think UCLA and Mick Cronin sort of fit the bill for the Big Ten. And that has cost them in the past, especially last year in the Pac-12, where there were a number of pretty good offenses and they just really weren't able to hang. But this sort of example, I mean, they did not make shots at all here and still win by double digits. So good for UCLA. I still think they are headed for the tournament. All right, Joe, we have two games going on tonight. One is final, one is, all but final. We're going to go to the one that's final first. A big shock here at the margin of victory. Maryland takes care of business over Ohio State 83-59 in College Park. I think we both thought Maryland would probably win this game being at home. They were 5-point favorites. But Joe, this was 50-17 at halftime. Ohio State actually wins the second half by 9 here. Kevin Willard's team rolls to an easy victory, and Ohio State, having lost Aaron Bradshaw, what's going to happen in their season is a whole lot more uncertain. But first, let's go to Maryland. Pretty impressive from the Terps.
Yeah, Sean, they did not take their foot off the gas. I mean, this was a pretty slow start in the first 4 minutes. From there, I mean, 50-17 at halftime. The fact that this has already been made a meme and the game was over just under 4 hours ago is pretty shocking. I mean, I don't know where to begin. You could begin with the Belmont transfer, Jacoby Gillespie with 23 points. You could compliment all the starters because it seemed like they didn't even need to get much rest because they were just onslaughting Ohio State no matter what lineups they put out there. Whether it was John Mobley Jr. going in there, whether it was Evan Mahaffey, it really did not matter. I think Michi Johnson Jr. did a good job on him. 2 of 13 from the field, a night to forget for that young man. And the only person who played well is Devin Royal, and they were really smart. They knew if Bruce Thornton gets going, this is the only way Ohio State could keep it close or win the game. But I think win the game was out the door after the 10-minute mark of the first half.
Yeah, Joe, the prospects for Ohio State season are getting pretty dire. I think they weren't the deepest team. They lose Bradshaw. Royal's obviously a player who's probably a starter on most teams here. And Mobley is really good, but after that, Joe, just 3 points outside of your top 6. You get just 2 from Micah Parrish. Talk about bad games for guards. 0 for 5, 4 for 7, 2 for 13. That is 6 for 25. That you're just not going to win any games in the conference, let alone a road game. And in terms of Maryland, Joe, I think their makeup is pretty similar to Ohio State. Probably your top 6 can really give you something, and pretty much all of them had a good game here. And when that's going to happen, you're going to look pretty good. But Maryland is 8-1. All of a sudden, they have just 2 high major non-conference games: a loss at home to Marquette and a win over Villanova. But Joe, maybe a couple of people questioning if they're really as good as their record, and they took care of business here. A statement that went around the league.
Absolutely, Sean. And it's kind of something we reiterated mainly 2 years ago because Maryland did struggle at home surprisingly last year. Xfinity Center's not a fun place to play. I don't know why that's gotten lost in translation. Perhaps it was the down years of the late Mark Turgeon era. do not expect going to Xfinity Center. Do not expect to go to Xfinity Center and to come away with an easy W. Whether you're a Purdue program, whether you're a middling, I mean, certainly if you're a middling program, no matter where you are, top to bottom in this conference, Maryland's going to be a tough out. And if you fall behind early, I hope this is fair warning to a lot of teams because Ohio State, we know they have depth issues. That's a team that could score 17 points in one half. My goodness.
Yeah, and you know, I think College Park used to be kind of the long trip in the Big Ten, Joe, and maybe that's why Rutgers too. Now, obviously, that's all out the window with the West Coast teams coming into town, but yeah, I mean, Rutgers and Maryland, we saw some weird results there. I do think this is a weird result, and Ohio State is probably not going to play this bad again. But the Buckeyes do fall to 5-3. They host Rutgers, and then they play Auburn in Georgia, and then they have a home game with Valparaiso, and then they go and play Kentucky at Madison Square Garden. So, Joe, Ohio State's got to figure it out pretty quickly here, or they're going to see some losses and probably some pretty hefty ones if they don't shore some things up here.
Yeah, Sean. I think that Rutgers game is a must-win for the course of their early I mean, absolutely for the early course of their season.
All right, Joe, the other game just went final. Perfect timing. We've got the Michigan State Spartans going up north to the airplane hangar, also known as the Barn, up in Minnesota. Spartans win 90-72. We think Minnesota will finish near the bottom of the pile. Dawson Garcia is a pretty good player, and he showed tonight 18 points, 11 rebounds. But, Joe, with no player scoring over 12, and it was Cohen Carr who led the way for the Spartans, a very workmanlike performance here from Michigan State, and they take care of business.
Yeah, Sean. I think Michigan State's continuing to ride their high from Maui. I think what they figured out is it's funny. I talked to someone at work today about it. Their best lineup might be Jace Richardson in there off the bench.
Definitely. He might be their best player.
Yeah, which is pretty scary because the guy might be in the conference quite a while, and he's not one of these guys. I know the easy thing a lot of people do for Michigan State football. Oh, he's going to transfer, blah blah blah. That guy ain't transferring. Look at who his dad was. He's a Spartan for life, and I mean, my goodness, the lineup they have with Aiken, Spears, Jace Richardson. You could have Trey Holloman in there when guys don't. When guys, when one of those three guys are out because he's kind of scrappy enough to take the role of a lot of them. Simone Zapala's come on, Jackson Kohler, Frankie Fiddler. I mean, I think they have 10 guys that could contribute on this team, Sean, on any given night. Now, maybe not all of them are explosive scorers. I think only an Aikens, a Booker, and a Carr to an extent. I think Fiddler is a really good bench player. I don't think he's bound to pop off for like a 20 kind of night. I do think he could get you 7 to 12 a night.
This is the first game, Joe, that he hasn't started. They did make a change in that department. But you have to say that they do have a lot of players who can play well. Now, my Fairfield Stags are in a similar spot where they have like 12 players who can be good, but nobody really taking the reins as a superstar, and that can get you into trouble in some points. But also, Joe, if there's somebody who can do that, Tom Izzo's had a lot of teams like this who have a ton of good players, no great players, and trying to maneuver that. And it might just be who's playing well that day. We might see a lot of different closing lineups here from the Spartans. Now, obviously, we were on this call here, so we don't know what the closing lineup for this game was, but the last thing we want to talk about here, Joe, is the three-pointers. Michigan State was under 30% as a team coming in. They make 11 of them, 11 for 22. That is 50% from the field. So, you know, if Michigan State's making threes, their ceiling gets drastically higher.
Absolutely shot it. They're still a Tom Izzo team. They're still rebounding. They're still playing defense, and they're still really scrappy. So if that comes along too, they're going to continue to be a tough out in this conference.
All right, Joe, the last thing that we'll do here is there's a game tipping essentially now. It's Oregon on the road at USC, and if you're listening to this tomorrow morning, you know what happens here, so we're not going to take any time previewing it. Oregon looks to keep their undefeated record on the line, and USC looks to play a little better than they have. We've got Purdue going on the road at Penn State tomorrow. Joe, this is an extremely interesting spread. I don't know if you've looked at it yet, but the Nittany Lions are 1.5-point favorites here at home at the Bryce Jordan Center. Both teams come in at 7-1. Purdue, they look good against Alabama. They lost to Marquette. They win the Rady's Children's Invitational, and Penn State loses there. They've looked awesome in their bye games. They're scoring it like crazy. They did lose to Clemson, who's pretty good, as people saw last night with them beating Kentucky. But, Joe, clearly some people are giving Penn State a chance.
Yeah, I really don't know why, Sean, not like to say that they don't stand a chance, but I think this is a Purdue team that's been there and done that. I know, we scream about the Zach Edey, the Mason Gillis thing, but this is a team that knows how to win, and I don't think Bryce Jordan Center is quite ready to storm the floor for this one. I do think, like at Ohio State learned tonight, if you fall behind early, it could become a monsoon, and I do think Purdue will fall behind in this game at some point, but I err more on the side that they'll be like a Michigan responding, especially a Matt Painter, who's seen enough in this league, being here for almost 2 decades, to know that, hey, we can make this adjustment here. We know they're going to do this. And I still think Mike Rhodes is really doing a good job so far this year, but I just don't see it happening, Sean. I don't know. I don't think they'll be able to shoot as well. I think guarding a Fletcher Lawyer is going to be difficult, containing him, and then a Trey Kaufman-Red. We know how that's going to go. So I don't know. I completely disagree with the spread. What about you, Sean?
Yeah, no, I took a look at the analytics while you were talking here, Joe, and it is a Purdue 1.5-point spread. And the metrics love Penn State. They're in the top 50 here with how much they've been scoring against some of these bye games. But I would think that the analytics might be a little bit skewed towards Penn State here. I would have thought that Purdue would be 3 or 4 point favorites here. They're not. Penn State has a good starting lineup. We're starting to see a theme here, Joe. A lot of these Big Ten teams have good starting lineups and not much after that. Ace Baldwin has been awesome. Yannick Niederhauser has been great. Zach Hicks, Nick Kern, Puff Johnson. He got 5 scores in double figures. And then DeLeon averages 9.1, but after that, there's a significant drop-off. And on the Purdue side, too, maybe they have a couple more bodies that they can rely on. But, Joe, depth is starting to become an issue in this conference. I think Penn State has a good starting lineup. And maybe in a home game, in a charged environment, you can get a good performance from everybody and win this game. But I just don't see it. I mean, Purdue has nobody really in their rotation except for Jakari Harris and C.J. Cox, 2 freshmen who are, solid players, but not really, like, they don't have to have great games to win. All these players have been with this Purdue program before. I don't see Penn State winning. They're going to have to play a defense, a level of defense that they haven't seen yet. And I think the Boilers get the job done on the road here. This might be another one, a psychological game here, Joe. A lot of people are hearing, a lot of Penn State players, they might be hearing how great they've been, and maybe they get punched in the mouth. I think Purdue wins a game that's pretty close, but they are ahead in the second half and win by 8.
Yeah, Sean, I think Purdue falls behind early, but eventually brings its way back in the middle of the second half and ends up with a semi-comfortable 10-point victory. I do think Penn State will put up a fight, but I just think Purdue's been in environments like this, and frankly, they've been in more tough environments than this, and hold off victories, especially Trey Kaufman-Renn, Fletcher Lawyer, Braden Smith. So, yeah, give me the Boilermakers by 10.
And Joe, this is their in this stretch of 6 straight quad 1 games. This is game 2. Ole Miss was. You've got Maryland at home, Texas A&M and Auburn on a neutral. So a real opportunity for a jump pad type of situation here for Purdue. If they can win, 3 or 4 of these next 5 games, they're going to be in really good shape before the Big Ten's the full Big Ten season really even starts. So, Joe, that's about the time that we were aiming for here. So, nicely done there for the viewers. We'll be back with more videos here on the channel over the next couple of days. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.